The fluorescent lights of Murphy's Corner. Store cast long shadows across the empty parking lot as Sarah Chen flipped the sign to closed with trembling hands. At 19, working the night shift to pay for community college, she'd grown accustomed to the solitude of closing time. But tonight felt different. Tonight, 3 men in their mid-20s had been loitering near the entrance. For the past 20 minutes, their laughter growing louder, their intentions increasingly unclear. What Sarah didn't know was that Salvation wore leather jackets and rode on 2 wheels. Inside the store's back corner, partially hidden behind a tall shelf of motor oil and automotive supplies, 6 members of the Iron Brotherhood Motorcycle Club were still browsing. They'd stopped in during their annual charity ride for children's hospitals, and Marcus Razor Williams, the club's president, was meticulously comparing prices on energy drinks, while his brothers debated the merits of various beef jerky brands. These men, covered in tattoos and road dust, looked like they'd stepped out of someone's worst nightmare. But anyone who actually knew them understood. They were among the gentlest souls you'd ever meet. Sarah locked the front door and began her closing routine, her heart pounding as she noticed the 3 men hadn't left. They were now pressed against the glass, knocking and calling out to her. "Hey, sweetheart, open up! We just need cigarettes," one of them shouted, his breath fogging the window. "We're closed," Sarah called back, her voice barely steady. "Come back tomorrow morning at 6. "Don't be like that," another one sneered, trying the door handle aggressively. "We know you're in there alone. Just open up for a minute." The third one laughed, a sound that made Sarah's skin crawl. "Yeah, we just want to talk to you. Get to know you better." Sarah's hands shook as she pulled out her phone, trying to decide whether to call the police. Would they even get here in time? The men were getting more aggressive, pounding on the door now, and one had moved toward the side entrance. That's when Marcus stepped around the corner, a bag of Doritos in one hand. He immediately sized up the situation, the terrified young woman, the predators at the door, the vulnerability of the moment. Without a word, he held up one finger to Sarah in a wait gesture and turned back to his brothers. "Gentlemen," Marcus said quietly, his deep voice carrying authority, "we've got a situation up front." The transformation was immediate. 5 seasoned bikers, men who'd served in the military, who'd raised families, who spent their weekends raising money for sick kids, moved as one unit toward the front of the store. They didn't rush. They didn't need to. Their presence alone was a statement. The 3 thugs were still pounding on the door when they finally noticed the bikers approaching. From inside the store, the laughter died in their throats. The biggest of them, a muscular guy in a designer tracksuit, took an involuntary step backward. Marcus positioned himself directly in front of the glass door, his 6'3" frame blocking the view. His brothers fanned out beside him, a wall of leather and solidarity. He made eye contact with the ringleader and slowly shook his head. "You boys look lost," Marcus said, his voice carrying through the glass. "The store's closed. Time to move along." "We were just," the tracksuit guy started. "I know exactly what you were just," Marcus interrupted, his tone hardening. "And now you're just leaving. Unless you'd like to wait around and explain to the police why 3 grown men were harassing a teenage girl at 11 o'clock at night." The thugs exchanged glances. One of them, a scrawny guy with bleached hair, actually looked ashamed. But the leader's pride was injured. "This isn't your business, old man. We don't answer to you." Tommy Tiny Rodriguez, all 5'6" and 230 pounds of pure muscle, stepped forward and tapped on the glass right in front of the leader's face. "That girl in there? She's somebody's daughter, somebody's sister. And tonight she's under our protection. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to get in whatever car you came in, and you're going to disappear. Because if you don't, my brothers and I are going to come outside, and we're going to have a much longer conversation about respect and human decency. Your choice." The 3 men looked at each other, their bravado evaporating. They were used to intimidating people smaller and weaker than themselves. This was a different equation entirely. Without another word, they turned and walked quickly toward a beat-up sedan parked at the edge of the lot, trying to preserve what little dignity they had left. The bikers watched until the car disappeared down the street. Only then did Marcus turn to Sarah, his weathered face softening into a gentle smile. "You okay, darling?" he asked. Sarah nodded, tears suddenly streaming down her face as the adrenaline drained away. "I didn't even know you were still here. I thought I was alone. I thought—" Her voice broke. "Hey now," said James Preacher Thompson, the club's vice president, his tone fatherly. "You're safe. That's all that matters. Do you have someone who can walk you to your car?" Marcus asked. "Or better yet, someone who can pick you up?" Sarah wiped her eyes. "My car's just over there. I've always been fine before." "Not tonight," Marcus said firmly. "We'll wait until you're safely in your car and on your way. And I want you to call your boss tomorrow and tell him you need someone else here during closing. This setup isn't safe." As Sarah gathered her things, her hands still shaking slightly, she looked at these 6 intimidating strangers who'd become her guardian angels. "I don't know how to thank you. You didn't have to help me. Most people would have just left or pretended not to notice." Tommy chuckled. "Kid, we've all got daughters, granddaughters, sisters. Every single one of us has women we love in this world. How could we live with ourselves if we walked away?" Marcus pulled out a business card for his auto repair shop. "You ever feel unsafe, you call this number. Someone will answer day or night. We look out for our community. That's what we do." Sarah took the card, clutching it like a lifeline. As she walked to her car, all 6 bikers stood in the parking lot, forming a protective semicircle. They waited until she'd started her engine, locked her doors, and pulled out onto the street. Even then, Marcus and Tommy followed her on their motorcycles until she was safely in her own neighborhood, just to be sure. The next morning, Sarah told her manager what had happened. Within a week, the store had implemented a new policy, requiring 2 employees during closing shifts. She also shared her story on social media, describing how 6 scary-looking bikers had been the kindest, most protective people she'd ever met. The post went viral, garnering thousands of shares and comments. People shared their own stories of being helped by bikers, of the charitable work motorcycle clubs did, of the disconnect between appearance and character. Someone even started a fundraiser for the Iron, Brotherhood's children's hospital charity, raising over $30,000. When a local news station tracked down Marcus for an interview, he was characteristically humble. "We didn't do anything special," he insisted. "We just did what any decent human being should do. You see someone in trouble, you help. It's that simple." But it wasn't simple, and everyone knew it. In a world where people often walked past suffering, where bystanders filmed instead of intervening, where looking out for yourself was considered smart and looking out for others was considered naive, these 6 men had chosen differently. They'd chosen to be protectors instead of passers-by. They'd chosen kindness over convenience. They'd chosen to use their strength to shield the vulnerable, rather than to intimidate them. 3 months later, Sarah attended the Iron Brotherhood's annual charity ride, where she presented them with a plaque honoring their bravery and compassion. As Marcus accepted it on behalf of his brothers, he looked out at the crowd of families, children, and supporters. "This plaque says we're heroes," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "But the real heroes are the people who choose kindness every single day, in small ways nobody sees. The ones who check on their neighbors, who defend strangers, who stand up when it's easier to stay silent. That's the kind of hero the world needs more of." The crowd erupted in applause, but Sarah noticed tears in the eyes of these tough, tattooed men who'd saved her. They weren't crying for the recognition. They were crying because they understood what she'd learned that terrifying night, that humanity's greatest power isn't strength or numbers or intimidation. It's the simple, revolutionary act of choosing to care.